Good day to everybody tuned in to Front Runner on our social media platforms. We're doing another great interview in our Zoom meeting series of interviews. And today I have the honor of being joined by the under-23 national team coach, Coach David Notoane, who joins me now via Zoom just to discuss how it's been for the year that he's been in the hot seat. I mean, we all know that he's the man who has an intrinsic DNA within South African football, having coached at various levels. So it gives me a great honor to welcome you, sir, to Front Runner, and thank you so much for your time and chatting to us.
Thank you, Kamza. Good morning to the listeners, and may the peace, love, and mercy of God be upon us all. Thanks for the opportunity.
Thank you, sir. Let's jump straight into it. I mean, how has this year been? I mean, you sometimes are looked at as maybe a further down the pecking order, but no one seems to get that you are actually what feeds that national team. And other countries are very good at kind of tracking their players through the different age groups. I think we're getting better at it. How has your last year of being in essentially the feeder and surrounded by so many talented young players, how's that been for you?
Yeah, thanks. Very good question, Kamza. It's one of the aspects that I've always stressed in many of the interviews I've done because the euphoria of going to AFCON, qualifying for the Olympics, can sometimes overshadow the big task that lays before us, as junior coaches, which is to deliver finished product to Bafana Bafana. So yeah, it's been a very, very tough year of mixed emotions. Starting on a short stick, but ending up on a good note, achieving the target of going to the Olympics. And now the task that lays before us is exactly what you are raising now, to which lockdown has actually afforded me the task of really, really zooming into each player and now looking at if Coach Mulifi Ntegi tomorrow calls me and says, I need a central midfield, I need a right back, I need a left back, can I say with conviction to him, take this one, is ready? And that's something we should never, ever really underestimate, because at the end of the day, it's the successes of Bafana that drives the nation.
I mean, you raise a good point there. I think you'll find that the world over, the age limit is not really a big factor. You find that a lot of national teams, if a player is good enough and there's a need for him in the first team, he will play. Is that the same? Can the same be said for here, or are we still very much compartmentalizing our players via their age group?
Yeah, no, we certainly putting our players in compartments,
Yes.
and unfortunately, that doesn't augur well, in terms of when we reach international competition. And perhaps that's the biggest challenge that we face going to the Olympics with the Olympic team, because most of our younger players, and 97's Olympic team are not regular super sport players. So now you raise yourself a question, you go into the Olympics, you take a Kamuelo Matlati, Atinko Sidlala playing in NFD, Let Africa Championship, against a Mbappe, against, someone playing at the top Champions League football.
Right, right.
So how does these young boys handle that and deal with it?
How do you compensate for that? I mean, I think obviously, you go into these competitions with a set with your own objectives, with your own targets, but there has to be, in the areas where first team experience is maybe lacking at a high level, how do you make up for it? How much harder does that make your job?
Yeah, look, Kamza, we work a lot on the mental aspect of the game with these players. At AFCON, henceforth, if you see, I'm one who likes to expose these players to the conditions of the competition, the opposition we're probably going to face before actually going to the tournament itself. Hence, the trip to Egypt was a beneficial one. In a friendly, we played against the Egyptians, and we're scheduled to go to Japan actually before the coronavirus took over. And that for me is part of the mental training, the mental adaptation exposure for the players to realize what it's about. So that's the one aspect. And in camp, of course, uh, I'm always one that looks at the positive side of life despite the
Right.
challenges that we face. And I try to be as positive as possible with the group,
Mm-hmm.
make them believe that we are peculiar. We've got our own style of play,
Mm-hmm.
and we have to go out there and play football the best way we know, and the rest will take care of itself. So then it in itself sometimes helps a lot, you know.
Okay, great. I mean, I love the terminology there of being a peculiar team, an unknown entity for maybe the other teams when you face up against them when it comes to the Olympics. But looking from the outside, some of the challenges we maybe see is the lack of player personnel at times. I mean, when you left to Egypt, you left with a skeleton team essentially, and still managed to pull a rabbit out the hat. What have been the greatest challenges? I mean, we see those. Is there anything else that you're having to contend with on a daily basis that's making things a lot harder than they should be?
Yeah, look, those are the challenges that are out there for everyone to see,
Mm,
and it really sometimes raises the question as to is our clubs really servicing the national teams to ensure that the country succeeds?
right.
Then that's a debate, for the next day in itself. But it's one of the key challenges whereby we are not in the same situation as your Egypt, where the league can be sort of sacrificed at the expense of the national program. Yes, of
Mm,
course. There are business aspects of the game, commercial obligations, with the professional clubs that have to be respected. Of course, we,
mm,
we know that.
mm,
But the bigger challenge on the playing side is our lack of uh, cohesion in terms of how we play football,
right.
how we coach football
Yes.
within our clubs. That has been one of the challenges that one has actually identified. And I would give an example of,
Mm-hmm.
and with no offense to any of the clubs, of course.
Mm,
Let me take an example of given Simangwa,
right.
who's a fantastic centre back at Highlands Park, who's had a very solid, consistent season.
Mm,
And we brought him in, and it's a boy I knew from the under 20. And
mm-hmm.
as part of the succession plan, we want to expand and widen the pool of players to ensure that everyone has a fair chance to go to Bafana.
Right.
So you look at Simango, and then you come to the international arena, and the game becomes highly demanding and highly complex, where each of the moments of the game you really have to take care of, from the
Mm,
build up of play, possession,
mm,
penetration phases, and deal more efficiently with the transitions.
right.
And the transitions from attack to defense sometimes requires that we have to be able to keep the ball,
Mm,
and not give again a turnover or transition of a transition. You know what I
right.
mean? Now,
Yes.
when you bring a player like that, for example, into a national team setup, he comes from a club that plays without a build-up, for example.
Right.
Or build-ups
Yes.
are far and in between. Now you
Yes.
demand of him that this is how we want to build up, and he has to link up with highly talented players up front.
Huh.
Your Mokwenas in the midfield, Mbules, who like to have the ball at their feet. Your
Right.
Ludas things, your Lyle Fosters, Kamo Machatis, who
Yeah.
like to have the ball at their feet. Now you're starting to ask him to play a game that he's not accustomed to in
Mm,
his everyday club situation.
right.
Yet he's a regular player, he's a regular starter in his club. And the pressure for you and the demand from the public and questions is, but why are certain players not being considered for the national team? So
Mm,
those are some of the challenges that are underneath that people don't see in terms of the composition of the team. And hence one would wish for a situation where we could have some form of uniform approach to say, as South African teams, we
yes.
generally like to build up play,
Mm,
from the back. Yes,
mm,
of course, based on the players and skills available to you as a coach in a club situation. You then determine on ratios of percentages. Are you at the 60-40 or 50-50?
mm,
But I've seen many a weekend game in the PSL,
right.
and I've sometimes seen zero build up, and I look at my players in that situation,
Yeah.
and then I worry. So yeah, that's the reality and the difficulty of being a national coach, of course.
Let's talk about that philosophy because I've always wondered why or if a white paper exists that kind of governs our approach in terms of style and philosophy. You see a lot of national teams where, however the senior team plays, is essentially filtering down, or in some cases filtering up from the juniors up to the seniors. I guess it's
Mm.
actually the more correct way, is that you learn it as a youngster and
From
are
the bottom,
playing in the
yes.
same way as a senior. How come we don't have that?
Yeah, look, it's look within the national framework. The philosophies, I think, the technical director Notoane outlined in terms of the elements of our game. You know, the Ubuntu, the Tamaya, the Pagati. You know, so which Ubuntu, of course, emphasizes playing as a collective in
Right.
terms of the technical skills that we have,
Yes.
and hence within the principles of play, of course. You know, and then you have your Tamayas, which embodies the creative elements of South Africans and the flair that people want to have within our game,
Right.
within the tactical framework of the game, you know. And then, of course, your Pakati is an element that we are struggling with, which is the finishing part of the game, the
Right.
scoring part of the game. That
Yep.
within our creative elements, we shouldn't just be neglecting the important aspect of putting the ball in the net. So that's what the national philosophy really outlines. Now, from a tactical point of view, it says if we're going to play as a collective, it's exactly as I'm saying. It means the principles of the game start, because the build-up of play, we can agree generally, as I'm saying, that we are a team that likes to build up from the back with short
Sure.
passes.
Sure.
Of course, yes, situations, as I indicated, will determine that in some situations, it could be one or two or three passes, and then the long pass comes when the opponents press you. But
Yes.
the point that I sometimes, and it's not clear, as you are saying, because we don't really engage, is some teams hardly even have that short pass, even when the player opens up to receive from the keeper, because
Right.
we as coaches sometimes demand that, no, 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 I don't want trouble here. I don't
At
want
the
to be
back.
pressed. I rather
Exactly.
play in the opponent's half. So
Yeah.
from that perspective, we still too diverse, in my opinion, to be able to make life easier for these players when they come to the national team. You know.
Okay. Now, you touched on it a little earlier. Obviously, national team coaching doesn't happen all the time. It's there are windows and weeks for it. So, in that off time when you're not with the players, what are you doing? Are you just digesting a whole lot of game video? Are you zooming the players one on one and chatting to them? What does your timetable look like when there's no international football per se?
Yeah, look, Hamza, for my situation, which is rather peculiar,
Mm-hmm.
as you would know, that I'm involved with Mamelodi Sundowns outside of
Right.
the national team commitments, and it's exactly for that reason that history has taught one that being a national coach sometimes limits your actual coaching, because your coaching happens, once every 3 months.
Mm-hmm.
If you are lucky, it's when you come to the tournaments that you will have FIFA weeks within 2 months. So
Right.
then it's not often that you can hold camps outside of the FIFA weeks. It's not often that you can pop into a club and, with arrangements with the technical staff of that club,
Mm-hmm.
address a specific coaching situation.
Mm-hmm.
So most of your job then becomes going to watch games, or analyzing the players, monitoring their performances, and eventually that becomes your job. So I opted to stay with Mamelodi Sundowns because
Right.
the Olympic program it's a very very short program,
Mm.
because if we say didn't qualify for Egypt, then it's bags packed and then wait 4 years.
Right.
And I just felt that I needed to stay, abreast of coaching trends and stay active. Yeah, so that's what I
Sure.
do. So
Okay.
my time schedule is really tight. I still work
Yeah.
within the club at Mamelodi Sundowns.
Right.
Weekend, I honor my games. I go watch other games to monitor players and recruit new players as well. So it's really hectic, but I enjoy it.
Okay. And in terms of a support system, the current one that you have now, and um, maybe what you need? I mean, do you have enough of a network of people to tap into for your players? Where are the areas of growth you'd like to see that would make your job easier?
Yeah, look, based on relationships, with colleagues in the coaching fraternity,
Hmm.
one has his network of coaches that, for example, there's a match happening in Durban and I can't make the trip.
Hmm.
I know there's people that I can call in to say, hey, I heard of such a player in this team who's really doing very well. Keep an eye on him, and we're using the modern technology as well. You
Mm,
can have games recorded,
sure.
links sent via email. Same thing overseas as well. I get a lot of links through various people that work within SAFA in terms of sourcing players overseas that are South
Okay.
African born.
Right.
And so I get links sent down. You watch the game online, and by the time you go out and invite the player, you at least have an idea of what is coming down. So modern technology has also really helped a lot in terms of minimizing and cutting costs
Yeah.
in terms of physical traveling. So
Right.
we use these platforms a lot.
Uh-huh.
Over this lockdown period, for example, there's an Instant platform, which is a software analysis platform where
Hmm.
most of the clubs globally are on, and you
Okay.
can source any player,
Yeah.
in there, follow their individual clips, their, data in terms of their game. So
Okay.
yeah, I've been working very, very hard now on that to ensure that there are those talents that we missed. We know that of
Hmm.
South African born players, especially in Europe. So I've used this time now to try to catch up and also analyze our game, as I said, in depth now, in terms of this current group of players to profile them properly for Coach Malifi.
Okay, and let's talk about these young players. How are you finding their willingness to be part of this national team project, especially those that maybe might have been born with another citizenship elsewhere? Do you have a hard time convincing players to kind of nail their colors to the mast, or do you find that working with younger players there's an energy to show and to prove that as a young South African we can be counted amongst the best? Or is there a hesitation to say, oh, I don't know, eh? Looking at what Bafana is and where, like, which camp do they fall into, the youngsters that you interact with?
Yeah, it's a very, very interesting conundrum. Truth be spoken, a lot of these young South African born players that are
Mm,
based overseas,
mm.
if you look at the trend, they pop up when junior national teams have qualified for something major. We can't lie about that.
Right.
When we go to, especially when you go to
Who's
the
doing that?
global
Is that the
tournaments,
agent? Is that the agent popping up, or
look,
how does that work?
yeah, of course, it's the agents.
Mm,
Of course, the agents have the interest of improving the market value
right.
of the player.
By putting them in the shop
Of
window at a
course,
tournament, yeah.
yes, I wouldn't say so much the clubs,
Mm,
because then the agent will go to the clubs, because the clubs would have communicated with us
right.
much earlier.
Yeah.
So that's one of the bigger challenges that then become. And then we also are a nation that seems to be excited about anything that comes from overseas
Mm,
without even testing it. We like my learned friend Oprah J said, we look at the tag, and if the
right.
tag says made in USA, you'll pay 1,000 rand.
Right.
But you take the same shirt and then you put a tag that says made in Mamelodi. People say no, it's Pongo.
Okay, but on that point, I'm going to take you to task on that because I think
Yeah.
you raise a good point. Surely, I think the right way of that is to say made in South Africa, but developed in Europe, developed in USA.
Yes.
I think we have
Yes.
to admit that there are places that we would prefer our youngsters to go.
Yes.
We
Yes.
have a few of your team are based in Europe, and we can't sit here and say that is not much better for them than them being here.
Yeah. Look, uh, coming back to the football context now,
Yeah.
what Europe provides is a highly competitive environment
Right.
at senior level.
Okay.
right?
Okay.
Because we are exposed to that
Right. Are you
every
making
day
a
on
distinction
TV.
now? Are you saying that?
I'm making a distinction now.
Okay.
Now, coming to the junior teams,
Yes.
right? We don't have everyday evidence that suggests that the competition level
Uh-huh.
in the junior setups in Europe are
Yes.
far ahead of us, except for the 5 top countries or top 10 nations. Let me put it to you that way.
Got it.
Okay, fine.
Right.
So, and that's a point at the moment that is so critical, especially with the junior national teams.
Mm-hmm.
Now, what you have there, what we know is the infrastructure in Europe in terms of development opportunities,
Yes.
of course, is better than the local ones. And
Yes.
we are bridging that gap slowly, you know?
Right.
So I'm trying to say here that we have to be careful, especially with younger players,
Yes.
of advocating a position that says because they are in Europe,
Uh-huh.
they are better than our locals, because contrary to that, actually, I'll give you another factor that now negates that.
Right.
The competition demands on the continent are different to the competition demands in Europe. For
Okay.
example, you will
Mm-hmm.
see that a lot of European teams like to scout West African, players for their strength and power.
Right.
Now, when you come and play qualifiers at under 17 and under 20, you're likely to gonna face your Nigerias, your Zambias,
Mm.
your Ivory Coasts, to contest for places to reach global stage. Now,
Right.
a young player coming out of Europe all their life, having not been exposed to that level of competition and football on the
Right.
continent,
Yes.
sometimes
Oh,
can negate whatever talent and qualities that they have, and it's something
okay.
that I've seen slowly that we need to be very, very careful of. Hence, I would say at junior level,
Mm-hmm.
more important is to bring this talent down and test it. Now,
Right.
I've qualified for the Olympics, for example. The Olympic team is going to Tokyo. And
Yes.
you've seen, I mean, so many names popping up,
Well, that's the
from
thing.
January.
The clubs love to suddenly offer their players when it's an opportunity for the player to go make a name for themselves, their clubs, and maybe for the club to move them on. But I guess
Yeah,
it's a
definitely.
part of the game that you have to deal with.
Of course. And there's
Mm,
a second part to it.
mm,
Football has also the social aspect to it,
right.
the emotional connection part to it. And the vibe of us being South Africans growing up Ekasi and now
Mm,
in our suburban areas and
mm,
urban areas, it's totally different, the vibe, so
right.
and also growing in Europe, especially, from a cultural point of view, sometimes there's a disconnect because the culture that our boys are used to and accustomed to is
Mm,
different to what this young, player would be bringing coming from Europe. But then he has to connect with the group because football is about the team, it's about the
yeah.
connection, it's about
So
the heart,
yeah, so he's
you
out of
know.
that culture. It's a bit of a culture shock coming
Yes,
back into that
yes,
mix. Okay.
yes. It becomes the culture shock,
Mm-hmm.
and you only have 7 days, sometimes
Mm,
10 days if you are lucky, for this
right.
player to integrate. And he's a young lad,
Mm,
So, hence, maybe sometimes you would see a little bit of a hesitancy from some of these players.
mm-hmm.
But we are doing good work, I must say, at the moment within SAFA structures to ensure that we collect the database. We know a lot of them.
Mm,
And the next thing is to go and monitor them in their clubs because that's where now they are comfortable and you can actually honestly observe and judge them based on their performances in the clubs. And then when you bring them in the national team, your job as a coach is now to manage this individual to make him emotionally connect with the
mm.
group and also make the local group connect emotionally with this South African player because at the end of the day, hereditary he's a South African,
Yeah.
and
Yeah.
that makes our job a little complex and exciting in a way.
Okay, let me put this scenario to you. Okay, you're imparting some wisdom and advice on a 15-year-old boy who's a talented soccer player. He wants to know, in terms of his trajectory, where he should be for his younger years, what target he should have when he's 18, 19, as to where he wants to be playing, and then where he should have his senior career. He's asking for your advice. What would you say? What would your guidance be to a 15-year-old South African? Because now you've brought into the spotlight the fact that actually maybe at a younger age it's better to stay here and then go seek tougher pastures in Europe when you're older. So how would you then guide someone who was that young looking for a way to be consistent at national level and to be a consistently elite player?
Yeah, look, first and foremost, a very good question and maybe a very good case study.
Right.
Any young player that is in South Africa, you would want to encourage him with his talent and ability
Mm-hmm.
to work hard to break into, the pro ranks.
Okay.
That's their first target.
Right.
You know, and from then on, look, we know of players that at 16, 17 have been able to play in our Premier Leagues
Mm.
previously, although
Mm.
it's happening a lot. It's not happening a lot now.
Right.
Then from then on, the shop window becomes to go overseas. You
Mm.
know, in order to take his or her career forward and grow it. You
Mm.
know, however, if there's an opportunity to go overseas at a younger age,
Mm-hmm.
due to the talent that is at the disposal of the global market, because
Right.
football is a global sport,
Yes.
it's still a trajectory that a young player can take,
Uh-huh.
but the most important thing is that when the player gets there, which is what we are doing now, is to assess the development and the growth of that particular player in relation to the national program. But
Yes.
I think at this point in time, truth be spoken, we have too many of our young players worried about going to play in Europe,
Mm.
as if our PSL league is not good enough or competitive enough. And I can tell you that having been in a lot of camps at different age groups,
Mm-hmm.
I've seen that our players locally are sometimes better than the products that are touted to be top coming out overseas into our shores.
Mm.
Not because of the talent coming out there is not, a good talent, but
Mm.
we have to show more faith and trust and belief in our talent locally. And it's our job as coaches, of course, to reach benchmarks of overseas coaching,
Mm.
and I can take you a little bit back and say maybe what is the difference is then, and I've always challenged our colleagues to say, Stuart Baxter has bemoaned the lack of structure within our
Yeah.
game,
Yeah.
discipline structure, let me put it
Yeah.
that way,
Yeah.
Now, hence, I'm coming back now to the cultural aspect, you know.
Mm-hmm.
And we've had this discussion with Coach Stuart Baxter and Coach Nzeki within, our interactions to say,
Yes.
now, how do you then bring a player that comes from a structured environment, which is life in Europe? We know it's
Mm.
structured. Things
Mm.
are very organized.
Mm.
People operate in their lanes.
Mm.
Whereas you look at us here, our life is kind of not so solidly structured. And
Yes.
those are the challenges socially now.
Okay.
So when you bring the two and you mix them, it makes for an interesting mix. And that's the
Right.
challenge why sometimes you would see, even in Bafana, players coming out of Europe, when they come and play locally, there's a little bit of a disconnect with
Yeah.
your local guys. It's
Yes.
purely based on that. And it's our job as coaches now to say, where is the balance?
Right.
And who are we at the end of the day? So because structure sometimes for us becomes a limiting factor in terms of our game. However, the lack of structure also can become a performance inhibitor when you
Mm.
go at international level. So,
Mm.
yeah, we are at the cul-de-sac, but we are working hard to find that balance so that
Right.
we don't lose who we are, which is where you hear people are saying we miss the sugar in our football. We
Mm-hmm.
miss the tamayas. Our football
Mm.
is no more entertaining because we are playing a European-based game.
Right.
But but the World Cup demands that you play
Exactly.
very structured, disciplined game within your
Yes.
creative elements to ensure success.
And I guess maybe that's where we all make a mistake is to remove the borders from, the football, because we always assume that structure means European. And I guess what you're saying is that within the right conditions and the right context, structure can be an African attribute, just as long as it's aligned with your game model and your philosophy as a country and a federation.
Definitely,
Mm.
definitely. That's what it's about.
Mm.
Uh, 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 Discipline, we all have different understanding, of discipline and applications of discipline. So
Right.
we are disciplined in our own way within our game. Let me put it that way, and so therefore, hence, those are the things that for me are very, very important. That football, remember, is an art, and it's an art that has to demonstrate who we are, the culture, the persona that we are as South Africans, different to Zimbabweans, different to Zimbabweans, different to Nigerians, within the framework of how the game is played. And hence, look, you take Squama Samatariano, you take Squama to Europe, any country in Europe, they'll say, what is this guy doing? He's a circus.
Right.
But
They want to see the
from a
efficacy.
technical, yes, because it's not something that it's their DNA, it's their culture.
Right.
But takes Kwama into a festive season game. He's playing very, very well, by the way. At Amatax as a left back, I've seen him.
Okay, nice.
So what you see there now is what Coach Zippo has done is he's taking this highly technical, talented player that is sometimes touted to be for the circus.
Right.
And he's changed his position, of course, from offensive to defense, but he's maintained who the player is, which is his culture of how we play the game, and modeled it within his team framework to ensure that he becomes productive. And that's our job, and that's what we should strive for in our game.
Okay, no, that makes absolute sense. The last question I'm gonna get into: what happened to the School of Excellence? I mean, it's the strangest story because you speak to anybody in football, and it was so evident and obvious that its impact and its efficacy is there for all to see in terms of the product, the players that came out of there. It would seem to me that the obvious thing to do is that when you're trying to fix football is to look at our history and look at what worked and say, man, we had this thing and it was solid. It's so weird and strange to me that it's taken so long for us to get back to having something like that. Why? What's the problem? What's the holdup? What's the issue? What do we as the public not know that maybe has us ignorant of the facts as to why it wouldn't work again or hasn't been attempted again?
Yeah, very, very good point. Actually, we were talking to our head of education the other day, and giving an example of that. And we have to acknowledge that somewhere along the way, the ball was dropped in as far as the School of Excellence is concerned. And the talent that came out of that school is there for everyone to have seen. And the success of the talent is documented. Perhaps where we also missed the ball was to expand that concept, into the rest of the country, which was the idea initially. Remember, School of Excellence formation was more towards forming a national academy there, as our ultimate center where the best of the best talent comes in there and becomes groomed and developed for the national teams and the professional rank. So I think there's discussions and work behind the scenes at the political level, of course, to try to reconstruct that concept and make it happen again. Of course, the biggest challenge also is commercial aspects. Football is commercial. You can't run away from that. We all know that Transnet was a big driver of that program. Now that also becomes a challenge when your most important commodity or entity that produces talent is dependent, almost, I would say, 90% plus on commercial support, because then what we see now is exactly the outcome of that situation. So I think there's plans to try to bring in the same concept nationally, but remodel it differently. You see now within the SAFA structures, there's provincial coach developers. So we are moving into the direction of saying, let's work towards having provincial academies that would fit into the national academy that hopefully will be the resurrection of the School of Excellence.
Okay. And then before I let you go, just to speak to the here and the now, I mean, COVID-19 has taken the world by storm. And so, how do you see football, your job, these youngsters changing after we get out of this lockdown to a world that is not ever going to be the same again?
Yeah, that's a very, very interesting situation. COVID-19 has changed and shaped football, in ways that when we go past this period and go back to the playing fields, uh, we can only hope that the players, coaches on the field will come out more hungrier, more recharged, you know.
Mm,
But from a commercial point, we also have to face the realization that things won't be the same.
yeah.
We can only hope that the kind of monies that has been spinning, because football is a billion-dollar
Mm,
business, as you know,
mm,
we
mm,
can only hope that that impact won't be massive, because then it will also have an impact in terms of income streams for players, coaches, and therefore affect the quality of life that we are accustomed to and through sport.
right, right.
But on the playing field, I think hopefully everyone comes out ready, eager, willing, and hungry
Mm,
to entertain more. You know,
right, right.
that's what I'm looking forward to. And you know what happens when you are in off season as a player. That 3-4 week period.
Mm,
The first week is usually nice, but by the second week you start to miss this thing, because football is an addiction. It's
right.
a virus of its own kind. I always told people that I don't know which of the viruses is actually more of a killer. Is it the viruses in terms of, you can see people are now dying to watch football on
Yeah,
TV. So it's a very, very global virus, but it's a virus maybe that is positive in its
of
nature.
course, of course.
And hopefully we'll all go back and enjoy, the excitement that football has given us
Okay.
over the years, and continue with our lives. Maybe if there's one thing that football can do,
Yeah,
is to take away the pains of COVID-19,
right.
and give us the gains of entertainment. You know.
Yeah, maybe let's hope it gets to that. And then just on the COVID thing, essentially you've now been given another year to prepare for the Olympics. Um, is I mean, I can only imagine, as much as the boys were excited to, you know, go to the tournament, it gives you more time to prepare. It gives you more time to cast your net a bit wider. How exactly are you hoping to benefit from the postponement to 2021?
Yeah, no, by all means, it's a welcome postponement, Kamala, to be
Mm,
honest, and
right,
especially being in a South African perspective, where you usually would have your 2 months maximum. I was lucky to have had 2 months actually
right,
of preparation, but now we have a year, which is, I think we are probably the first team that is blessed in this way.
right.
So indeed, yes. First, the bigger issue is to try to get commercial, partners that can
Okay,
help us achieve our program,
right.
and make sure that we also give ourselves a fair chance to compete for gold,
Mm-hmm.
because that's what we want to compete for.
Sure.
Then two, it gives us an opportunity to grow the team, uh, you know, tactically,
Mm,
especially
mm,
these elements that I've mentioned. It now gives us the time to really integrate all the elements that are
mm-hmm.
required for optimal performance,
Mm-hmm.
which includes, of course, widening the scope of our talent, bringing players from different cultures that are of South African heritage, and
Mm,
making sure that they connect with this current group, because this is the end of Vision 2022 in terms of progression of talent to Bafana Bafana.
yeah.
It also gives us an opportunity, and the players, I've challenged them already to say, this current group of players have to fight for a place in Bafana Bafana,
Right.
the extraordinarily talented ones, especially, because if the younger ones out there raise their hand,
Yeah.
and we have now to make a decision that is informed by what is the future of the national team looking like. Do you take, for example, Eitebo Mokoena, Atinko Sitala,
Mm-hmm.
Sipompule
Mm-hmm.
to the Olympics as a player that's just ending at the Olympics, when you have another young boy at bit best, Rowan Human,
Mm-hmm.
you have a Promise Mkuma, who is younger, yes, but he's got a future in Bafana Bafana.
Right.
So
Right.
you'd know the best decision for that, you know.
Right.
So those are the opportunities that this 1 year is actually affording us at this point in
Okay. And if they had to play a match under 23s versus Bafana Bafana, who would win?
time. Bafana Bafana should win.
They
because
should, but
because
who would?
because
Who
we have
would?
the under 23 players in Bafana Bafana.
No, 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 no. If you had to take your under 23s, put them into one team against Bafana Bafana, who would win? You versus Coach Nseki. Who wins that match?
I should win, I suppose. Let me be selfish there.
It
No,
will
no.
be a
Look,
great match.
yes, it will be a great match. Great exposure of talent. It's at the disposal of the country.
Right.
But if experience is anything to go by, Croatia, you know, has given us some food for thought. Portugal is
Right.
also giving us the experience. Is always the winner when it comes to
These
competitions of youthful exuberance against experience. So
right.
no, definitely Bafana should be the winner for the
Okay.
sake of the nation, of course.
For the sake of the nation. I love it. On that note, we're gonna end it. Coach Notoane, thank you so much. You're such a smart, thought out man, and I guess that's probably got to do as being part of your skill set as a coach, that you are able to impart your wisdom and your words and your vision, and you've done that in about 30 minutes, and I really really appreciate your time and your effort for that.
Thank you very much for the opportunity, Kamza. And let me take also this opportunity again. I know we are all looking forward to a relaxation of the lockdown conditions, but it's very, very important that as we go back to what we know best, our normal lives, whatever our normal lives are, that we remain healthy, we comply to the regulations that have put before us, you know, sanitize, wash your hands, wear your mask, because, you know, relaxation of the conditions doesn't mean that COVID, the virus is not gonna hit us. It can come back and hit us. So let's keep supporting the government. Our president has been fantastic, and the cabinet in leadership. It's all for us South Africans to do what we have to do to ensure that we go back to our normal lives sooner than later. Thanks for the opportunity, and God bless you all.